We have got more calls. Sean and Tony, I will try to get to you, but we have got a government minister now to give us more details, specifically now as regards the settling of these poor individuals in many cases who we got. And as we were saying yesterday, every welcome must be afforded to these poor souls. Safeguarding Minister Victoria Atkins joins me now. I believe it's being called Operation Warm Welcome within the government. Exactly what does that mean and what are we going to provide for these individuals? Minister, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. We very much want to ensure that the people who've been flown into our country over the last 2 weeks, some 15,000 of them, receive exactly that, a warm welcome. And so we have announced today that Afghans who have come under a scheme called ARAP, which in short is a scheme for people who've worked with the British Army over the last 2 decades, whether as translators or security guards or as soldiers and so on, that they are given indefinite leave to remain. That's important because it gives them stability, but it also means that they can enter the job market. And we know that many of them have talked to the media over the last few days, talked to us and told us that they really look forward to taking up their old jobs here in the UK. But we're also announcing a package of measures to help integrate people into our communities, because we very much want to build on the success of the Syrian resettlement scheme that we have run over the last 5 years. We want integration to be key to that. So, for example, we're going to be helping to educate their children, and we've announced £12 million further funding to support their particular needs in the education system. We want to help adults who may not speak English well. We want to help them learn our language so that they can contribute quickly as possible. And of course, housing. That is critical to ensuring that people feel settled. It's a huge challenge. We've announced a top-up fund for local councils because we know that some local councils are struggling to find homes for some of the families that we're looking after.
Well, that's what interests many of my listeners, Minister, you'll be aware, because it's not as if we're blessed with a big housing stock. There are areas that are really having crucial issues with housing. Where are these folk going to go? How will it be determined?
Well, we are working very closely with the local authorities to see what they are willing to offer, what they want to offer, what they can offer. And at least a third of councils have made firm offers of support, but there are talks going on with many, many more. And we do acknowledge the concerns that people have. You know, I'm going to be straight with people throughout this process. We do acknowledge the concerns in particular about housing, which is why, as I say, we've announced this top-up fund for families to house them. But importantly also, this of course goes alongside the work that the government is doing to help housing stock more generally. So only yesterday, MHCLG, the Department for Housing, announced £1 billion for affordable homes over the next 5 years. So we very much want to integrate people into our society in a way that is fair to them, but also fair to British people.
Just staying with this theme, Minister, you'll be aware, and I say again, most of my listeners, of course, want these incredibly brave individuals who served as drivers and interpreters, but they've also, some of them have been on, or their children have been on housing waiting lists for some years. And I'm going to be absolutely brutal with you. While we want to welcome these people, they feel it's a little unfortunate if they're promoted over people, their children, who've been waiting for years. But that's the reality of the situation, I sense.
I don't think it's quite as clear-cut as that. As I say, we continue, all of our work continues we continue our programmes of work on social housing and affordable housing. As I say, the investment announced yesterday is a really significant investment. And that's going on, that's happening. But we need to get more houses built, which is why the Prime Minister and the Housing Secretary have talked about plans to build homes across the country. But we have to face facts. We have 10,000 people staying in quarantine hotels today. I've got to get them out of quarantine over the coming days into probably bridging accommodation. Again, I've got to be frank, we haven't got the housing stock available to put them straight into homes, but we've got to do this in a way that is fair to British people. I totally recognise that, and it's part of my approach to integration. I want for people to feel that this is a part of our country being incredibly generous. And people have shown, actually, over the last few days with the donations they've made, the offers of help that people are making as well. We've had people offering accommodation where they're able to. And so we really want to seize all of that kindness and use it to its best extent, but also do so in a way that is fair to British people and your listeners who you've mentioned.
OK, so that's here in the UK. What is the number of so-called vulnerable Afghans who've still in Afghanistan? What number do you have?
We've been very careful with the numbers because, as you'll appreciate, it's a very volatile situation over there. We know that there are British nationals left in Afghanistan in the low hundreds. Some of them, of course, are very brave journalists who we still see reporting from Afghanistan on our television screens and on our radios. But we are working out with people on the ground as best we can. The Afghans that have been left behind who are eligible under the scheme, under the government assistance scheme, if you like, trying to avoid acronyms, but also the wider cohort of people who we will be looking at under the wider resettlement scheme, those who are particularly vulnerable to the Taliban. And that may be, for example, because they have stood up for women's rights, they've served as a councillor or an MP, and the Taliban, it is feared, will target them.
Yes, indeed, but there are two figures. One newspaper, The Eye, says it's around 1,000. Meanwhile, The Times says it's closer to 9,000. Which do you sense is the more accurate figure?
So we don't recognise the higher figure, the 9,000 figure. I mean, we know that, as I say, part of the problem at the moment is trying to measure how many people we need to help. You'll appreciate we've got pages from officials on the ground, but because we have withdrawn, trying to reach that information is one of the complicating factors of this already pretty complex picture. And of course, when we have settled upon the scheme here in the UK and really finalised it, which we're working at pace to do, we are still, of course, looking to third countries and indeed the Taliban to play their part. And so the news overnight that Sir Simon Gass, the Prime Minister's Special Envoy, has gone to Doha to enter discussions with the Taliban is an important step, because we now want to hold the Taliban to the UN Security Council resolution that was passed a day or so ago. And
just talking about the vulnerable people, Minister, there is a report that only broadly half of the 69 female Afghan MPs were safely evacuated. Is that a story or a figure that you've heard as well? And what might be done for those poor women who, I sense, might be in fear of their lives?
Yeah, so again, officials are working as best they can on the ground. We know the Defence Secretary last night...
when you say officials, though, I thought we withdrew.
Outside of Afghanistan. So the Defence Secretary last night used the phrase Dunkirk by WhatsApp, which sums it up. Yeah, we've got to work with play the cards we have. We're no longer in the country, so we've got to try to find people and give advice as best we can through communications. But it is incredibly difficult, and I'm very grateful to colleagues and parliamentary colleagues who are contacting me with details as they are at the moment.
Last couple of things. Operation Pitting was the word for the operation. The brave men and women took place in the evacuation. There's a suggestion that they should be afforded a medal if you were part of Operation Pitting, but there is a military decree that if an operation is 30 or fewer days, you don't get a gong. Do you think they should get a medal, Minister?
Well, I'm not from military stock, but as a civvy, I would want to recognise the extraordinary efforts that not just soldiers of course, but also civil servants, officials, border force officers and others have played over the last 2 weeks. And indeed, of course, this last 2 weeks was a culmination of 20 years of hard work, of sometimes terrible suffering and loss by British soldiers and families. So I'm not a member of the military, as I say, but I hope...
No, but you have a view. And lastly, you'll have a view on this, and I'm bringing you right back to domestic matters, nothing to do with Afghanistan, but a story that was in the headlines some time ago. The double child killer Colin Pitchfork, I would imagine you'll remember that story. He was jailed in 1988 for the rape and murder of two 15-year-old girls, will be released from prison this week and put in a probation hostel next to unsuspecting families. You're the safeguarding minister. You happy with that?
I can't comment on the individual case, Nick, because as a minister, I'm not permitted to. But there is, with any offender of the nature, murderer, rapist of the nature you have described, there is a very, very strong regime of controls put around that person once they leave prison. The categorisation of this person, I can't really comment on, but
you're confident everyone will be safeguarded who needs to be?
There will be very, very strong routines, including the police, put in place around any person with that background, with those convictions leaving prison. It's absolutely critical that anyone with those sorts of convictions are monitored very, very carefully and closely. And of course, if they break rules, etc., then measures can be taken by the police and others to bring them back in. But that will be, I've no doubt, will be monitored very, very carefully.
Grateful for your time today. Thank you. Safeguarding Minister Victoria Atkins appearing here on LBC, where at 1 minute after 8 news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's